Okay.
I'd like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting for the Mount Diablo Unified School District Governing Board for January 19th, 2022. And we are just coming in from closed session. We're going to start with our Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll go to roll call. Vice President Nzewi.
Here.
Trustee Fowler.
Here.
Trustee Mayo.
Here.
Trustee McFerrin.
Here.
Trustee Cowan.
Here.
Trustee Mason is here, so we have a full board. Now we will look at the review and potential approval of the agenda.
I move that we approve the agenda. Second.
Thank you. Trustee Fowler.
Yes.
And that passes maybe in a minute. You're okay. And while we're waiting for that vote to come in, we want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral lands of the Bay, Miwoks, and the Yokats. Okay, so reports out from our closed session. We're still waiting for that to come up.
Start the vote.
Okay,
There we go.
that passes 5 with consenting vote from our student rep. All right. Negotiation 7.1, the board may discuss negotiations and provide direction to its representatives regarding represented employees pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The board gave direction to the team as well as received information. There was no items for 7.2. That takes us to public comment. The public may address the board regarding any item not on the agenda. Do we have any public comment? 8.1. No public comment. All righty. 9.0, communications. District organizations at regular board meetings, a single spokesperson of each recognized district organization may make a brief presentation. Items are limited to those which are informational. Do we have one of those? Okay, Anita Johnson, thank you.
Hello again. Good evening. I am Anita Johnson, president of the Mount Diablo Education Association. My pronouns are she and her. MEDIA is a united group of educators working together for the benefit of the students of the Mount Diablo Unified School District. The students of this district need a qualified teacher in every classroom and a qualified employee in every position. You are in negotiations with all of your bargaining units and you're making absolutely no progress. Why do you continue to allow management to ignore, neglect, and delay? School Services has updated their dartboard to include new projections for COLA for the next 3 years. The new COLA projections are significantly higher than the previous projections and will generate over $7 million in ongoing funding. This is enough to fund a significant increase in your salary offer. Your chief business officer has stated that she always uses the School Services projections in her multi-year projections. We expect to see the results of these updates in bargaining next week. There is no longer any excuse to delay. We have presented management with very specific strategies to adjust district spending and budgeting to demonstrate that our salary proposal of 12.5% is reasonable and affordable. You do not need to take prep time away from hardworking teachers in order to balance the budget. You can afford to address all of our demands in negotiations and still have funds left over for textbook adoption and other needs. This is not the time to be asking for sacrifices from your employees. We expect that you will honor our work, value us, and conclude negotiations quickly with a just and fair settlement. In addition, we expect that you will prioritize attracting and retaining qualified staff. The teacher salary schedule has not been increased since 2017. The starting salary offered by Mount Diablo is currently less than the average offered by surrounding districts, and most of these districts will be increasing their starting salaries in the near future. The district has the funding to afford a 12.5% salary increase over the next 3 years. Staff have had stagnant salaries for the last 3 years and need a significant salary increase in order to make up for what has been eroded due to inflation. Even a 12.5% increase between now and 2024, when the contract ends, will not be sufficient to combat the amount that prices will increase between 2017 and 2024. 12.5% spread over 6 years is barely more than 2% per year, and inflation is now running at over 5% per year. Another proposal that we have involves the elimination of certain combination classes. Our experience has shown that most students benefit more from being in a class with students at the same grade level. This is a compromise from our demand for lower class sizes, which are more expensive. By limiting all classes to students in the same grade, some classes will be smaller than they otherwise would have been if all classes had had lower maximum enrollment. Prohibiting combination classes will provide some relief for students from being crowded into large classes. Additionally, staffing for transitional kindergarten programs is important. The new state law requires specific adult-to-child ratios. We are proposing to include this requirement in our contract. The district is resisting this change. It is much more difficult to enforce a state law than to enforce contract language. The state requirement of class size limits of 24:1 in TK through 3 is the best example. The district did not implement this requirement, and the state has taken no action to enforce it. Medea believes that students in transitional kindergarten need and deserve to have sufficient adult attention to keep them safe, to make sure their first school experience is positive, and to support their development. I ask that you direct your team to accept our proposal and include this legal requirement in the contract. And why are you allowing your team to continue to propose a reduction in prep time for hardworking 4th and 5th grade teachers? These teachers are doing the very best they can to meet the needs of 34 students, and like all teachers, must frequently work evenings and weekends to get everything done. Their students come to them with a very diverse range of abilities. Many are struggling with trauma and learning disabilities and stress, and these teachers are trying to prepare them for the challenges of middle school. Yet the district is proposing cutting the teacher's prep time from 2.5 hours per week to 1.5 hours per week. Such a reduction would leave these teachers with less time to plan lessons, grade papers, contact parents, analyze assessment data, complete independent study packets, prepare materials, and all of the other tasks they need to complete and to meet as many of their students' needs as possible. If permitted, this reduction in time dedicated to this work would certainly lower the quality of the students' learning experiences and cannot be permitted. How can you allow this to be proposed? Given the current level of state funding, this is no longer the appropriate time to be asking employees to make sacrifices. In addition to the higher COLA from the state, there are areas of cost saving and simple corrections to projected expenses that will demonstrate to anyone that the 12.5% salary increase we are proposing is affordable and will allow the district to maintain an ongoing balanced budget. The most important correction is to the projected step and column increase, which management incorrectly calculated at 2% and is clearly less than 1%. Making this correction will decrease projected salary costs by $2 million ongoing. Another necessary correction to the projections is in the area of local revenue. Local revenue dropped considerably during remote learning, partly because teachers did not collect lab fees. In 20 to 21, local revenue was $11.2 million. In 1920, the year before, local revenue was $14.2 million. Even though in-person learning has resumed and teachers are again collecting lab fees, management has conservatively estimated local revenues for each of the 3 years in the multi-year projection between $11 and $11.9 million, the same level as during remote learning. Using the average revenue from the 3 years prior to remote learning, $14.9 million, would increase revenue projections in 23-24 by $3.6 million. A necessary cost-cutting measure exists in the area of consulting fees. Management is proposing to increase fees paid to consultants by almost 20% over last year. The estimate for these fees for this year in the first interim report is $14.2 million. Based on the unaudited actuals, fees paid to consultants last year were $11.2 million. Given the district is experiencing declining enrollment, fees for consultants should be declining. Using an estimate for consulting fees based on the last 3 years of actual expenses would reduce projected expenses in 23-24 by $2.3 million. As you can see, there are several aspects of each of these areas that would benefit from additional illumination through discussion. There may be valid reasons that we are not aware of behind the estimates used by management. Until we understand those reasons and the details behind them, we must continue to believe that a 12.5% salary increase is affordable. We wish to engage in dialogue with management so that we can reach a shared understanding of district finances. The district agreed to meet next Monday and asked for a list of questions. On January 11th, we sent a list of 24 straightforward questions to allow them to prepare for that meeting. Yesterday, they returned our list and said they couldn't possibly answer that many questions. And could we make the list shorter? Their response is appalling and gives me little reason to think that anyone on your management team is truly interested in resolving this conflict. It seems they are looking to delay the process into next year. Will you truly continue to allow your employees to be treated this way? Will you truly do nothing to address your employees' need for protection from inflation now? Will you truly do nothing to ensure that this district can attract and retain employees? Do you value your employees? I hope you can understand the anger I am feeling right now. I hope that you share my commitment to the highest salary offer that is affordable, and that you understand the importance of discussing the finances and ensuring the most accurate projections possible. In my experience, different perspectives are essential for creating accurate projections. Please encourage management to engage in communication with us on these topics and to increase the accuracy of the projections. Given the current level of state funding, it is no longer appropriate to be asking employees to make sacrifices. Yes, the district is experiencing declining enrollment and may need to employ fewer teachers next year. And a smaller district to manage means the need for fewer managers. I strongly encourage you to look at your management staffing and reduce it by the same percentage by which you reduce non-management employees during the layoffs. It seems that you hear so much about what management does and needs to do that you forget who is really serving the students. I implore you to look really seriously at management staffing and not yet your personal relationship with management impact your budget decisions. The students who will still be here, these are the best educational experiences possible. The most critical element to their educational experience is a qualified employee in every position. Please make this your priority as you deliberate how to spend the new money that is available to you. Finally, I want you to know that there are a lot of people who wanted to be heard this evening, but were prohibited from participation by the in-person nature of this meeting. I strongly encourage you to return to virtual meetings. In conclusion, please hear me. This is no longer the appropriate time to be asking employees to make sacrifices. We expect that you will honor our work, value us, and conclude negotiations quickly with a just and fair settlement. If your management team will not engage in dialogue, what other option do we have to resolve this conflict? What do we need to do to get your attention? What other option do we have? Thank you.
All righty, that takes us to 10.0.
Yes, thank you very much, President Mason. And tonight I'm bringing for board consideration, we have resolution 21/22-46 in recognition of February as Black and African American History Month. Whereas the deep-rooted intrinsic value of Black and African American history presents our educational institution with an opportunity for recognition, teaching, and celebration. And whereas Mount Diablo Unified School recognizes and celebrates the history and contributions of Black and African Americans who have been overlooked, misinterpreted, and undervalued in the curriculum of public educational institutions. And now therefore be it resolved that the Mount Diablo Unified School District Governing Board proclaims the month of February as Black and African American History Month and encourages all schools to commemorate this occasion accordingly with appropriate instructional materials, discussions, presentations, and projects. And be it further resolved that this executed resolution be distributed to all schools within the Mount Diablo Unified School District boundaries. President Mason, this item is now in the hands of the board.
Thank you. Board members? Either one.
Okay. Here we are again, about to come upon February. Our education around Black history in the United States tends to focus on Black trauma, whether it's the atrocities of chattel slavery, lynchings through Jim Crow era, murders of little Black girls going to church, or the assassination of Black leaders. All extremely important things to be taught. It's in order to know and understand how these events help shape who we are as a nation today. However, Black history isn't synonymous with Black trauma, and Black people and our history are so much more than that. So one of the whereases that is also included in this resolution is that Black and African American history is continuously being made, and concurrently, classroom discussion that is courageous is encouraged in the Mount Diablo Unified School District as an essential function of student-centered wellness and education. And so I want to encourage our educators to not focus on only the traumatic events of our history. So I found, this is a quote, these aren't my words. It goes without saying, but there's much more to Black history than the trauma and resilience that Black people in America have overcome and exhibited, be it science, politics, education, sports, cinema, the performing arts, religion, business, activism, engineering. There is no sector in the world that African Americans have not contributed to in some form of fashion. Of course, we all know that. If we all know this to be true, why are institutions of education around the country still limiting their celebrations to the degradations of Black culture? So I'm just offering two things that people can do that are actually really cool and fun. I've experienced them both. And they both uplift Black joy in a time that's just already super stressful, is to visit the Oakland Museum of California and see the exhibition called Mothership: Voyage into Afrofuturism. So if you love science fiction or music or art or anything like that, it's all there, including a really long Spotify playlist. And Afrofuturism it's the past, present, and future reimagined through a Black cultural lens. I couldn't find, they do have, if you Google that Mothership: Voyage into Afrofuturism, there are a few videos, and there's one in particular on YouTube of a woman who created a video of the different parts of the exhibit, but there's no online tools, unfortunately. So you'd have to go, and it's open through the end of February. And the other thing, which is who hasn't had the chance, we've not had a chance to go to a good old fashioned parade in a long time, but this is the 5th year of the Black Joy Parade in Oakland on February 27th. But even if you can't go, especially for educators of our youngest children, they have on their website, which is blackjoyparade.org, a free coloring book that you can download, which includes coloring pages, a word search, and something else I can't remember. But it's all free, and it's just images that are fun, that would be fun to color. I couldn't color in kindergarten. They were going to hold me back because of that, so I won't be downloading them, but because I still can't color. But I know a lot of people can and do enjoy that, and even adults. I know it's a good like centering mindfulness activity. So those are two resources I recommend. And with that, I move that we approve. I lost the page, I'm sorry. That we approve Resolution 21-2246 in recognition of February as Black and African American History Month.
Thank you. Other board members?
I'll second.
Did you want to make a comment as well, or?
Yeah. Piggybacking off of what Trustee Nzewi said about educators, for instance, like one thing my English teacher is doing this year is there's a list of Black just historical figures that we don't normally learn about other than like Martin Luther King, that she created like a list. And there's also one on the internet that's really good that I used to use for Black Student Union meetings last year when we were going over this. But if you just look up famous Black historical figures, a bunch will come up, and there's people like you wouldn't even, no one knows of. But really emphasizing on this month is really to celebrate Black achievement, as we should all months. But I feel like what Trustee Nzewi was saying is we really focus on the trauma instead of just moving kind of past that, in a sense, where there's also the good part of what African Americans have done in this country. So really just giving visibility to the people and organizations that have created change and are still creating change is really important this month. And I hope educators all take a step back to educate themselves and to educate their students about all the great things that African Americans and Black people have achieved in this country.
Thank you. And before you go, Trustee Cowan, it was actually Trustee Fowler that seconded that.
Thank you. I just wanted to take this moment to also recognize Trustee Fowler for her efforts, not only at College Park in starting the BSU Club, but in building out those efforts across the district. At the Student Advisory Committee meeting this afternoon, it was really fantastic to hear her share out her experience at College Park in growing the club from 0 to over 40 members, including underclassmen who will continue the club ongoing. But also then the way that Trustee Fowler, I just appreciate the way that you're encouraging that kind of student leadership and creating a space for students to share their leadership at their schools as well. So I just wanted to celebrate you. And then I just wanted to mention one event that's kind of connected to all of this as well, the African American Uplift program with that NAMI Contra Costa is doing, that they're launching tomorrow afternoon at 4:30, designed to support peers, families, and the community, utilizing lived experience, African-centered approaches, and community-defined strategies. Black Minds Matter. So, thank you.
Any other board comments before we take a vote? I would just say what I say every single year. We talk about this around February, but it's our expectation that this is happening in our schoolrooms every single day of the year. So with that, we'll take the vote. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
And that passes 5-0 with concurrence from our student rep. Thank you. I see no public employee appointments tonight, so we will go to reports. Dr. Clark?
Yep, I'm going to call up Dr. Gonzalez and her team to come and talk about the FICMAT report and what our plan is to provide next steps.
Board member reports. Okay, give me 1 second.
Thank you very much. There is no formal presentation tonight. Did want to give you this document. This is in the very roughest version possible. So the poor director of maintenance and operations, Melanie's name seems to be on this an awful lot. So it was a starting point, because what we're now going to do is we're going to start meeting with the department to start delineating where responsibility lies for some of these components. But wanted to present this to you. This does acknowledge the fact that there's been some work done behind the scenes over the course of the last 6 or 7 months since we started bringing FICMAT in the first place. They started identifying areas of weakness and of concern that we tried to jump on as soon as possible. You know, we wanted to allow them to continue to do their work, but there were some things that we could certainly do in the meantime. This also allows us some logic and some approaches to deal with specific factors. And we're going to go ahead and continue to bring this. So for the time being, we'll bring this again. It'll be much cleaner in February, late February, when we bring it again, certainly with more delineation and some additional input from departments. So happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I would just hope, as the other document, periodically it'll be brought to the board just to give us an update on how we're progressing. Because I like that format where we're tracking what we're doing. So
Absolutely. So the plan right now is to bring it January, February, March. We'll take April and May off. We'll bring it back again in June. And then plan would be to continue to do that quarterly, if not more frequently.
any other questions from the board members? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No.
Okay,
I did have a brief, I just read in the public comments that there was a concern about an internet access issue at our adult school. So I just wanted to confirm whether adult school buildings are included in these plans as well.
Correct, except I think it's probably more applicable for another
Technology.
board item that we have coming up. Yes, thank you.
all right. That takes us to board member reports. Let's start with trustee Fowler.
Oh, great. So over the last week, for those of you who don't know, I am a part of the California Student Board Member Association. And in that, I play the role of the Director of Partnerships. And within that position, I am the head of creating the National Student Board Member Association, along with several other leaders across the United States. And we had our first meeting last Saturday, which was so great and amazing. And various student board members attended from Hawaii, all over California, and Hawaii actually only has one student board member for all their states, which is very interesting. So Hawaii, all over California, New York, Massachusetts, Maryland, Virginia, Tennessee, and various others who attended. And it was really great to hear their perspective and like what's going on in their district and what I could bring to this district as well regarding the appointing of the new student board member or how to engage with students more. So that was just extremely beneficial. And then I also attended a math debate with professors from Stanford and some from the UCs. And a lot of San Francisco Unified teachers were there as well. And it was basically like the pro and con side of accelerated math. And I know San Francisco Unified has a lot of controversy in that going on, so it's a big part of their district. So it was really just informative to hear both sides and bringing it to this board and see what they think as well. So, because I'm sure it's going to come up in future years, maybe next year. And then I also attended the core literature, the core and extended novels list meeting on Tuesday, and it was great. I was really happy seeing high school and middle school principals there. I saw Mr. Honey, my principal, there as well. That was nice. And we worked on updating the MDUSC core reading list with the sharpened lens for equity. It was really great. And then earlier today, I had the student advisory committee meeting, and various club leaders shared I shared my experiences from College Park with the Black Student Union. And then we had some students from Ignacio Valley there who shared a social justice club and what they've done to impact their community. And then one of my leaders, she goes to Northgate High School, and she shared a community service club she's in. It's called Drive to Support, and I'm hoping to bring that maybe to College Park and maybe introduce that to YV students as well. Hence they were there. And then lastly, I do have an Instagram. It's mdusc.sbm, and I post a lot of updates on there. And one of the things I just posted was the state seal of civic engagement. As graduation for seniors approaches and the end of the year approaches, please get those applications in, because at the end of the year, when you receive your diploma, it's eligible for juniors and seniors, but you can get a state seal of civic engagement on your diploma, and it's really great. It's like the seal of biliteracy. It's like a new thing we introduced in our district, the state seal of civic engagement this year. So I'm hoping to spread the word about that so more students can apply and get that on their transcripts.
Thank you. I think we'll go this way. Trustee Cowan, we'll start with you.
Thank you. Just a couple things since last week. So I attended the Walnut Creek City Education Committee meeting, where they gave an update on school crossing guards, and they also discussed their SRO program with their city police department. It appears there were still SROs in some of the other school districts in Walnut Creek. But the police department itself is having a lot of issues with vacancies. And so there actually is no SRO program happening this year. In the crossing guard discussion, I had the opportunity to remind them that the city had originally fully funded crossing guards in the city of Walnut Creek before the year where the city was facing financial challenges, and at that time had asked schools or parent groups to temporarily contribute half of the cost. We hope that they will return as a city to fully funding crossing guards as a city traffic safety issue. Also had the opportunity to tour Sun Terrace Elementary with Concord City Council member Obringer. It's her city council area, and she was very interested in visiting the school. The highlight was meeting the famous Miss Jerry, who has volunteered in the school library for 20 years. She went to the school, her kids and grandkids went to the school. She knits, and I didn't bring them with me. Shoot, I had a visual to show. She knits these fabulous bookworms and sells them for 50 cents. And then the proceeds pay for more library books. So it was fabulous. Really great to see that kind of community dedication in our schools. Lastly, we have our CCCSBA meeting tomorrow night, 5:30 to 7:30, with Dennis Myers discussing the governor's budget. We'll also hear from Stanislaus County of Education about their lifeguard initiative for staff and student mental health.
Thank you. Trustee McFerrin.
Good evening. I really will be brief this time. I haven't had any meetings since last time we met as a board, so I'll just provide an update on my grading for equity efforts. We started a new semester, so I changed my grading policy, and some of the changes that I'm implementing are focusing more on mastery grading, changing the percentages and categories that I'm waiting for my grading, accepting late work without a late work penalty, and allowing redos and retakes. It's been kind of a great time to start doing that, especially because my students have really required kind of more flexibility and reassurance that their grades are going to be okay, if they have to be out. And so I continue to implement these things in my classroom and work with my colleagues and really receive positive feedback on these improvements for students.
Thank you. Trustee Nzewi?
Oh, sorry, I too will be brief because it's only been 7 days. And my work and here has really just allowed me to just pay attention to the state budget. So I did attend today, the county office did a presentation on the governor's budget. I couldn't attend, I attended like half of it because then I had to go do other stuff. But it's really boring if you're not into that, but I am. So So I'm eager to continue to gain understanding, especially about public school funding, because my expertise is elsewhere. And I look forward to the Contra Costa County School Board Association presentation tomorrow evening around the state budget. And that's really cool that you're bringing the mental health sample from Stanislaus, because I think that's something that's so replicable. So I look forward to hearing more about that. And I am attending tomorrow night the Uplift NAMI event, or it's not at night, it's in the afternoon. And I wanted to say one more. Oh, a group of advisors of Black student unions within and around our district got together, and I can't remember if it was last Thursday, if it was the week before. Like, I don't know where we are in this month, so it might have been before the last meeting. But what was really great about that was what came out of the conversation was doing things to connect the BSUs, so and their families, but also to connect the older kids to the at least their middle school counterparts. So I look forward to continuing to be engaged in that work.
Thank you. Trustee Mayo?
Yes, thank you. The CCCSBA meeting has been mentioned twice, so I won't go into more details regarding that. On Thursday, the 20th, the DLAT committee has its meeting beginning at 5:30 to 7 p.m. So I hope folks will be attending that. Also, I want to make an announcement about the Mount Diablo Council of PTA's meeting on January 26th, which is a week from today at 7 p.m. We are having Mani Bonsack from the School and Community Services Department for Mount Diablo School District speak to us about shared vision and equity, collaboratively working to ensure all Mount Diablo students feel welcome, safe, and supported. This presentation will begin shortly after 7 o'clock. Anyone who's interested can contact me and I'll share the Zoom link. It will be a Zoom meeting. And then when we get to business, then you're welcome to leave. Thank you.
Are you welcome to stay as well?
Oh, yes.
I just wondered.
Just can't vote.
I really don't have a report because it's only been a week since we were here. I did attempt to get on the CBOC meeting and there was a problem with the link, so I missed it, but I made an effort. So with that, I'll turn it over to the superintendent's report.
Right. Good evening, board. It was just recently that we were all together, and so definitely glad to be back. And tonight I'm going to share some information with you around our district assessments and accountability. At the last meeting, I extensively dedicated my whole report to the COVID mitigation efforts that we are all making within the district and our families as well. So I'm not going to revisit that this evening. But I've made a commitment to this board to bring data on a regular basis to you all and share. And so this report that I'm sharing tonight, I'm just going to briefly go through it. but I will email it to all of you all, and I will post it. We'll have it posted on the district website in a prominent space. So, so again, you don't have to take notes or anything because you're all going to get it, and it'll be posted for the public and staff tomorrow morning. So again, this is our, again, we are going to do assessments 4 times a year, every quarter. And this is a ongoing assessment, sort of such as like a formative assessment. When we do our state testing, that those students take the test last year and we get the results. We actually just got our results from last year earlier this week, end of last week. And so I'll be bringing those to you at a future meeting. But again, that data is from last year. And so this is real-time data that our educators can access and our parents can see, and the school communities can use to continue to monitor and work on student achievement. So as you remember, this is a result of our systemic instructional review. And within that review, there were some recommendations that we conduct an assessment audit at school sites to determine assessments and actual use. And when we did that audit, we found that there were multiple assessments being used. And so this is one to sort of streamline that. And 5D is create an assessment continuum that identifies lead and lag and that defines when they will be analyzed at the central office and school levels and reported to the board. So that's what I'm doing here. Then set the expectation for the use of benchmark assessments at all levels to capture a clear understanding of student learning at a minimum, do it quarterly. So again, so we're following those recommendations. I'm not going to continue on just reading that because I did share that before, but so this is an SEL update. If you remember when I shared this during the first quarter, we hadn't given it to our smallest, to our youngest students. And so here the administration window is currently open and student responses are being collected. Grade 2 students are participating in the elementary SEL survey for this round. And TK1 teachers are to assess students in social emotional learning competencies in this round. So everyone who didn't take the social emotional survey are taking it now, and that's our smallest students. But what they are taking they are taking letter sounds, recognitions, uppercase, lowercase, and things of that nature that are grade appropriate for them. And so this is results of how they're doing. And what we found, this is just a summary, percent correct comparisons to the assessments number 1. So when we took a baseline assessment, this is the difference of that. So kinder letter sounds have gone up 6%, recognition from 0 to 20, and then we're talking about words here, that's up 4%, uppercase letters 4%, lowercase levels 6%. And again, I'm not going to go over all of these, but this is just our TK and K assessments. I will talk very briefly about our 1-3 diagnostic assessments. And so, of course, this is too small for you to see, but what we're measuring here, we're measuring students that are on or above grade level in reading. But then it also, when you break this down, it does show the amount of students that are below grade level and how many grades below grade level they are. So we're really getting accurate data there. But the highlights here are just the summaries. 30% of grade 1 students are at or above and are on grade level or above, and 43% of second grade students and 61% of third grade students. And that's from our reading diagnostic. And the difference that made from the first quarter, grade 1 is up 11%, 2 is up 16%, and 3 is up 12%. And then what I didn't share last time, but we're adding it now, and we're gonna expand on this, is the reason why we had to do a systemic instructional review, and the reason why we had to do a SACE plan and things of that nature is because we have student groups that are not performing, and they haven't performed at a particular level over the last several years. And so we're being mandated by the state to come up with a specific plan on how we're going to address those students' needs. Our students, when we report our data to the state breaks down our students' groups in many different ways. But one of the ways that they break them down is race and ethnicity. And so we do have to provide those numbers and we have to report those numbers. And so, and so just briefly on our grade 1 through 3 reading diagnostics, we see all of our student groups are 31% during diagnostic number 1 and 45% on diagnostic number 2 for a difference of 13%. And then as we go down the list, we can see our Asian students, our American Indian, Alaskan students, Black and African American students, Filipino, Hispanic. Missing our folks who did not fill out the in their registration, they did not identify what race or ethnicity they identify with. And then of course we have multiple, and then Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islanders, and then our white students. And so you can see the difference there. On the bottom, we have our EL students, we have our socially economically disadvantaged students, we have our special ed students, we have our foster youth, and we also have our homeless. And so the 3 student groups that we're monitoring closely under our mandate are our Black and African American students and our foster youth and our homeless students. And so you can see where they are on this particular assessment. And then we do the same thing for math. And so just the highlights, 23% of first grade students at or above, 28% of second grade students at or above, and 33% of third grade students are at or above. And there go the differences. And then we have it now broken down percentage of students compared to the first diagnostic, and we have it broken down by student categories and also race and ethnicity. And then as we move into 4th and 5th grades, these are our IABs and our FIABs, and also 4th and 5th grade, and also middle and high school. So 4 through 12 are in this next section. And just an update on here is secondary students, middle and high, completed the second round of their IABs and FIABs prior to winter break. And the administration window for 4th through 5th grade students is currently open, and grade 3 students will remain as optional for this administration window. And again, this is an update on all of the FIABs, even though the data I'm going to share is just 4 through 12. And again, that's too small to see, but we'll go to the next slide so we can see. Well, actually, I can read some of this. So again, as we're looking, blue are students who are above standard, and red are students that are near their standard, and yellow or gold are the ones that are below standard. So what we can do is we combine the red and blue, and that's really the number we're looking at. So if we say we're 6th grade, 37% of our 6th graders are working below the standard, and the same with 7th grade, and the same with 8th grade. And then you see a little jump in 9th grade where 78% of our students are working below standard. And then in 10th grade, it's 61%, 11th grade, it's 55%, and 12th grade, it is 54%. And when we average that out, and we have about 46% of our students at this particular time who are working below grade level. And so we can see the differences from the first quarter. You can see +6 for 6, 7, 7, 11 for 8, 9 for the 9th grade, 11 for 10th grade, and 11th for 13th for 11th grade, and 14th for 12th grade. And then we have it broken down by ethnicity, and also our identified student groups. And again, this will be posted so we all can look at it and you could formulate questions. And again, this is to inform our practices. This is how we did in math. So we have 40% below standard in 6th grade, 36% in 7th grade, 32% in 8th grade, 57% in ninth grade, 40% in 10th grade, 32% in 11th grade, and 56% in 12th grade. And so overall, we have 38% of our 6th through 12th graders are working below average in math. And again, I could flip it and say 24% of our students are above and whatnot. This is just again, that's our targeted group. So, and we can see the differences there. And then we will go to our, again, it's broken down through ethnicities and our student areas. I do want to highlight the foster youth on this one did an amazing jump here from 8% up to 40%. So kudos there. I'm not quite sure what happened, but that's something that we need to bottle up and replicate. Then in secondary, what we also look at Ds and Fs. And so again, this gives us the multiple measures. This is not replacing chapter tests, quizzes, projects, things like that, but it's just a way that we can, from a whole district-wide level to really get a snapshot of how our students are doing without waiting until next year. So Ds and Fs. This is all the students at a school that have at least one D or F in the first semester. So again, before we just looked at quarter grades, but semester grades, especially when you're in high school, semester grades stay with you forever. And so we take those grades very seriously. We also take our middle school grades very seriously, but those high school grades is basically a tattoo on your academic record. So we want to pay close attention to that. And so here we have in sixth grade, 27% have one D or F, 37% of seventh graders, 38% of eighth graders, 37% of ninth graders, 44% of 10th graders, 40% 11th graders, 30% of 12th graders, for a grand total. In all of our secondary classes, we have 36% of our students who are receiving at least one D or F. And we can see the difference from quarter one, because all we had was quarter grades after the first quarter, and now we've implemented the semester grade. And then we have it broken down by ethnicity. So if we look at those groups that we're targeting, 50% of our African American students in the first quarter we have at least one D or F. And going down to our foster youth, 53% of our foster youth have one D or F, and 54% of our homeless students have one D or F. And they both showed some improvement. Here, you don't want to go up, you want to go down. So when we see a negative there, that's a good thing. Then we look at multiple Ds and Fs. So more than one, 14% of sixth graders, 7% or 24% of seventh graders, 25% of eighth graders, 24% of ninth graders, 29% of 10th graders, and 23% of 11th graders, and 15% of our 12th graders, for a grand total of 22% of our secondary students have multiple Ds and Fs. So, and again, we have Illuminate. Illuminate is a testing application, and so at the school site, the administrators, and I'm not sure if the teachers have access, but you can click on these bar graphs, and it will give you the kids who are in here. So I'm sharing district-wide, and so of course it's going to vary at different school sites, but this is created so that we can find those students who need that extra support and highlight that. We can also highlight those students that are doing absolutely fabulous, and we want to be able to recognize them as well and see if they have needs as well to meet. So again, this is just putting data out there and putting it in the hands of those who really are going to have the biggest impact on affecting that data. And then if we look at the changes, so lots of negatives there, but I do see 3 pluses, and so that's that's something that we want to pay attention to. And when we look at our groups here, you can see African American students, 33%, have, again, you don't want a high number on this, so you want the lowest number possible, and you can see our foster youth and homeless youth. And just in comparison, I mean, you can look up and down the list there and see which student populations are performing and which ones, need continued support. So that concludes this. And again, this is just a snapshot. One of my goals is to make sure that in all of our settings that we're referring to data and we're not just making assumptions, or we're not painting something rose-colored glasses when really there's some warts there that we have to address. And again, we want to look at our students in multiple ways. Test scores are not everything. Grades are not everything. And, social emotionals are not everything, but a combination of all those three things really paints a student profile that we want to tap into all of those and make sure that we're raising our students' academic achievement levels at all levels. Unfortunately, when it comes to the state tests, those are the ones that hit the paper. Those are the test scores that our realtors share with prospective home buyers. Those are the ones that folks often go to first. However, there is all kinds of good learning taking place in all of our classrooms, and students all react differently to different things and have strengths and challenges in many different areas. So again, not to make any students or student groups, feel bad. This is just what we need to do. And the more comfortable that we get with talking about data and sharing our data and coming up with plans to address our data, then the more successful more of our students will continue to be. So again, this concludes this presentation. I will at a later date share our CAS data, and I also will be bringing our suspension data for the last couple months and sharing that with this board as well. So with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you have any questions.
Any questions from any board members? Go ahead.
When it says meet standards or at grade level or above, is that where we would expect a student to be at that point in time? Or is it the full standard of when I remember in third grade, by the end of the year, this is what you should know? Is it compared to that?
Right, it's where they are, where they should be.
Where they should be at this point in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And then I don't have a question. I have a comment to Trustee McFerrin. I really look forward to hearing your experience this semester of changing your grading practices. Because I know that with what you're doing with rewriting and allowing late work and whatnot, things that don't typically, things that could normally contribute to a D or an F, which is demotivating to a student, that allowing students to have the chance to show their mastery. I look forward to see if you see a difference between last and this semester, because I know there are teachers in our district who are also doing the same, like, let's try out this new way of grading and see if it's a more accurate picture of what our students are actually learning. Thank you for the data. It was very comprehensive. I appreciate it.
Trustee Fowler?
I'm just piggybacking of what Trustee Nzewi just said. But I noticed for certain teachers who say, oh, you cannot do any retakes, or I don't accept late work, that really contributes to their students' grade negatively, of course, as it's seen. But also, I feel like the main point about education should be absorbing what you're learning. And if I'm not allowed to retake a test, how am I I didn't learn anything. I don't know what I'm doing. So my AP Stat teacher, Miss Strange, she's really just amazing about being understanding of what students are going through right now, and also being understanding of, I just want my students to learn. She just wants them to absorb the information, no matter how many times it takes them to get an A on a test or anything, but she's just really understanding. And I wish that I noticed that a lot of my senior teachers are more understanding than my freshman teachers would be. I'm not sure why that is what it is, but I wish some teachers would take into account how everything has changed since the pandemic, but just retaking tests, it's not a bad thing. And not turning in late work, it's not a bad thing either. At least I'm putting in the effort, and students are putting in the effort to want to retake a test to improve their grade or just to understand the concept more. So thank you, Trustee McFerrin, for changing your policy, and I hope teachers look to do the same.
Also, to add on to that same topic, I was going to ask what we thought some of the, if we were to change our grading practices as a district, what that impact would be on Ds and Fs. Hearing from Trustee McFerrin, actually all three of you about this, I'm reflecting on my own experiences, and when my first year in college was a very challenging academic year with Stanford University engineering. I had two different experiences. One was in the physics class, they thought physics was a good way to weed people out. So they would give you a test that nobody could do, and the average score was, like 10% on the test. And to me, it was just a test of like how we reacted to stress. And then my intro to electrical engineering class was exactly the opposite. You could retake the test. And in fact, after the first test, the teacher matched up people with tutors. If you did well on the test, you could be a tutor. And if you didn't do well on the test, you could get a tutor. And it was peer tutoring. And then you could retake the test. And I think it was thanks to that professor that I ended up majoring in electrical engineering. Because I had that same experience that you're talking about, where this teacher really wants all of us in the room to learn the material. That's the actual goal, right? And his belief that we actually could all achieve that was key. So I'm really interested in this whole conversation and looking at this number of students that have Ds and Fs. The other thing that I hear a lot about is that once you have one or multiple Ds or Fs, it's so hard to dig yourself out of that hole that you begin to just lose hope, and why keep trying. So I just wanted to piggyback on that, but I'm very interested in that topic overall. I also did want to ask a couple of questions that don't have to be answered today, but just things that I'm interested in. One is looking at where there were improvements. So you mentioned the foster youth big jump in math. Also looking at 9th grade math, the first quarter was a little bit frightening. And then when you look at the first semester, there was a big jump in improvement. So I would love to hear, what did we do in that period of time? What interventions are working? Did we have tutoring? Did we have particular curriculum in place? Are there examples at specific school sites that might be using particular materials, especially in math, that maybe we want to look at expanding district-wide? And I think similarly with the reading scores as well, looking at, are we using the science of reading? What reading strategies are we using in what parts of the district? If there are certain schools or grade levels where we're seeing higher reading scores or bigger improvement in reading, what's happening there that's working? Thanks.
Yep. So just a couple of things is that, to have a discussion around grading practices and policies and things of that nature, I think we absolutely need to look at the data, and we need to, get input from everyone in that process. But definitely the data is where it starts, and so that's why I'm always so excited to talk about data, even data that's not great, because I think that can really start to bring about a momentum of change. And so that's my first thing. Second thing, responding to your question, is that our expectation is that instructors in the classrooms are using the district adopted standard-based curriculum. So that's what I hope they're using. And it's not always an intervention. Sometimes it's what teachers do, right? It's that good first-time teaching, it's reteaching, it's helping kids build their confidence, it's giving that feedback and things like that. So again, as we talk about this more and more, we do want to create that space where we get away from our data is now going to be something that's used punitively, right? We're going to come shake our finger at a certain school or certain grade level or something like that, or using our data really to provide that avenue for feedback and for change, and to be able to improve practices, and and focused professional development on the needs that we have. So yes, I'm
It's okay.
very
Thank you.
excited to continue this dialogue. I know Ms. Sachs and her team are very committed to this. And tomorrow morning, I have a meeting with all of our principals, and we'll be talking about this as well. And hopefully the principals are talking to their teachers and support staff about this as well. And hopefully it's also reaching the students, where students have this is all about the students. It's the only reason why we're here is our students. So we don't want to hide our data from our students. We really want to bring our students in and embrace them with the data and help them really, play a role in their education and their success. So I'm excited to continue this, and I appreciate the thoughtful conversation and the feedback from the board.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. That takes us to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are approved under a single motion unless the board or a member of the public wishes to pool any items. I will be pooling 15.6 and 15.7. And if there's no other items to be pooled, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move the board adopt the consent agenda with the exception of 15.6 and 15.7.
I'll second.
Thank you. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Madam President, I may not be able to vote because my computer is restarting and doing an upgrade.
Okay.
Can't-
Unless somebody
we
can
have a
tell me how to
spare.
get out of it.
My word, can't get out of it.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do a voice vote on this for the time being. So trustee Mayo,
Yes.
trustee Cowan,
Yes.
trustee McFerrin,
Yes.
trustee Nzewi,
Yes.
and trustee Mason votes yes as well.
She went first.
Yeah, she got the lead because she always gets to vote verbally. She didn't have to worry about the computer. Okay,
Yeah, I can address this.
You wanna
So,
address that?
Yeah, so we brought this item back unchanged because we got some further information after it was kicked back. And so I don't want to put anybody on the spot here, but I do see Jen Sachs here. I do see Samantha Allen, and I do see Kelly Cooper. And so if any one of those three would like to come up and shed a little bit more light on these two items, then hopefully we can make a decision and go forward.
Absolutely. So we did end up going back to the company. We explained the concerns. The way this company organizes their work is actually they contract with individuals to come to a venue. So they are not overseeing anything having to do with the supervision of students or anything of that sort. The individuals that are part of engaging with students at the events are the parents as well as the staff members that are at the event, and they are all fingerprinted. They have all been through background checks. So this is something that many of these event planners often do not mark because of the contracting that they do with the DJ and then with the caterer and all of that. So they don't want to mark it to say they're insuring it when truly they cannot. So again, we do have the principal here if there's any more specific information, but that is why after contacting the company after last week, the items as the attachment have not been changed.
so my question would remain, even if it's not their responsibility, I'm assuming security guards and DJs would be interacting with our students. So who's ensuring that they're fingerprinted?
We did share that. And again, how they responded was how they responded
Not
with
their
regards to, they could not
Probably can
ensure
use that one
that
for-
all of the individuals that they
juice.
were with, and that does, when they mark that box, they are ensuring that. So again, it is the responsibility of the staff members as well as the parents that are there. So at this point, that's the information that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So at the actual event, the security is run by our chaperones. And so all of our check-ins, all of our interactions with our students are with certificated staff members or our parent volunteers that have been vetted through our district processes. The security guards really maintain the perimeter of the building. Similar to if you're going on a field trip and going to a museum, the museum will have security guards as well to make sure that students go outside particular boundaries. So none of the employees that are putting on this event interact solely with students. All the students are chaperoned at about a 15-to-1 ratio, and they're chaperoned by volunteers and certificated staff members that are fingerprinted. I will mention also that Events to the T is run by Toby Crosser. He's been working with the district since 1999, and he also works with 3 high schools for this particular round of events. So 3, including Northgate, 2 other high schools use the same event planner, and I guess their contracts just aren't up yet on the board docket. Do you have any questions for me?
Okay, I would just make the comment, I'm well aware of the company, and for a while they had no problem checking the box that said they insured it. So I don't know what changed on their end, but thank you for answering my questions. So with that, if any board members want to make a motion, you can do so. Or if they want to ask a question, they can ask a question.
I just want to thank you for being so diligent, and this isn't the first and only contract. And I really appreciate the care and attention you put towards the safety of our students at our events. And so I've learned from you, because I didn't think of that. Do you know what I mean? So I just wanted to thank you for that. And I'll just move to approve the independent service contract between Events to a T and Mount Diablo.
I'll second.
I think we have to do them both individually, don't we? Yeah. So 15.6, or which would be 16.1 now?
16.1.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have a second on that?
I second.
Thank you. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
And that passes with 4-1 on the board members, with the yes vote from our student rep. I'll entertain a motion on the next one if someone wants to make it.
Madam President, I move to approve the independent service contract for Northgate High School's junior prom on February 26, 2022.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
And that passes 5 with a no vote from trustee Mason and an affirmative vote from trustee Fowler. Okay, that takes us to business and action items. Review the revised courses of study of high school math. I'm dying to see if these people are as excited as the English people were.
Yeah. Ms. Sachs is going to take this item.
Absolutely. They are extremely excited. This has actually been quite a long haul for many departments and team members. And we've got quite a few actually in the audience tonight that have been working very collaboratively, whether or not the area of focus for their work is pure math and science, which would be Megan Gertz, our curriculum specialist. She, alongside Susan Hartwig, have been tag teaming along with Aileen Lee, as well as our coaches here in the audience, in order to ensure that these courses that, again, we're either on typewriters or utilizing on DOS or Word, now they're all in the Googles. So these are not all of our math courses, however. And I know that was a wonderful question that was brought up. These are ones that were most in dire need of updating. And as we move forward, we'll be bringing more. Currently, our math framework for the state is being revised. It's actually going to go out for public comment, I believe, in March of 2022. So as changes do occur and we need to update the courses of study, whether or not something comes from the state or from the UC doorway, We will continually to revise them, and if it's significant, we will be bringing them back after vetting them with our department chairs back to the board for approval. So this is certainly going to be a process, and you're going to be seeing more and more courses over the next couple meetings. And I do have staff in case you have specific questions about the math courses.
Are there any-
Erin?
I bet our engineer down here does. Go ahead.
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Yeah, so I think also for the public, I think is interested in this as well. So how does this change the pathway of math? Can you explain that or show it for the student who comes in, who's struggling the most? What does their pathway look like versus the student who wants to go get their PhD in math? What does their pathway look like with this, and how has it changed?
That's a great question. And that's actually something that we're looking at starting even in middle school. So many of our students who struggle when they get into high school and would be taking these courses would have been struggling earlier on. So we're working with TNTP and working on learning acceleration and working with many of our elementary schools, but also some of our middle schools. So addressing the needs in middle school so that we hopefully have far fewer students getting to high school who are struggling. This process is not going to necessarily change the courses that we're offering right now, but looking at the courses that we do offer is something that we're doing currently. And so we're going to look both at middle school and high school and make sure that our pathways make sense and that they aren't hindering our students in any way. So students who want to get to calculus and take calculus are able to do that. And then students who maybe need more support are able to do that and be successful and graduate as well.
Okay, so this doesn't actually change what courses we're offering in the district? Is that what I just heard you say?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think you explained also, Ms. Sachs, that the reason this is not including every math course is that, can you explain that again?
Yes, of course. So this is not all inclusive of all of our high school math courses. You'll be seeing calculus courses being left off the list, as well as some other ones. It's not to say that they're not also in need of some revision, but we're trying to take this on in batches. So our department chairs, as well as our teacher teams, have an opportunity to really process and reflect on the content, have the time to do that, and then we'll bring the other ones in order to take a really close look. So again, we do have additional courses. AP Statistics is one, Calculus AB is another one. There are some that at the high schools, they're all offering upper division types of courses. But again, those will be coming forward later for a review.
Great, thank you. And so it also doesn't change what courses are offered in middle school, the idea of accelerated math in 7th grade, algebra being offered in 8th grade.
We are currently working with the math department chairs, teachers, as well as the administrators on that. What we've noticed is that there is quite a bit of data that is showing that if students, even in an accelerated 7th grade course, there are some gaps if they go straight into algebra. So we're reflecting back on what would it take to ensure that students, as they go through a 7th grade course, have all of those prerequisite pre-algebra skills in order to be successful moving straight into algebra. In order to place students into math courses, we use multiple measures. And so we're reflecting on those as well, because the last thing we want is to plop students in an algebra class in 8th grade. They are not successful, and then they enter college feeling as if they're behind because then they're in algebra again. So we are taking a look at that in order to make sure that our students get a solid foundation of mathematics in middle school, so they'll be more successful as they transition into high school.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the team that made sure that these updates are happening.
Looks like you're going to get grilled from our student now.
No, I just had a quick question. I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this if you know, but for instance, if not enough students sign up for AP Calc, would that class get cut from a school?
There are times that it's unfortunate, but that has occurred. The great news is we've learned a lot with regards to offering courses online.
Mhm.
So we actually have a pilot group of middle schoolers that are taking algebra online. We did not have enough space in order to open up additional sections across multiple sites, but what we have done is we're working with a teacher. We have increased their FTE to such a degree that they're actually hosting this online and providing that level of support. So there are situations that unfortunately that does occur based on the numbers. We do hope with the way we manage our master schedules that there are other places that we might be able to move FTE in sections in order to make that work. But it's unfortunate, and it's something that unfortunately does occur.
Yeah, I was just, I know for certain, like to get into a UC, it's a lot of like cutoff if you don't take AP Calc. It's a lot of say like you don't get in if you don't take AP Calc. So I was just like wondering what we can do to regards of like you need extra support, or if the board can help you out anyway to make sure like we offer these math classes to students who want to take them.
It's a great question. What we really want to encourage our families and our students is take the most rigorous classes that they can. And that's also conversations that we've had with our counselors. We want to make sure they understand it's not only really good for students, so they can show in their transcripts that this is something that they've been successful at, but it does allow us to spread out our students in such a way where we're not having to close necessarily the sections that might have a couple less students. So we often do a lot of recruitment as well. And so utilizing our other staff members on campus that know the academics of the students, really wanting our math teachers to encourage those students that may not really have full confidence in themselves, to encourage them to try to take a risk and to take that upper division course.
Can I just follow up on that? Because I actually did just hear from students who, it sounds like it was this year that were signed up for AP Calc or IB Calc. And they said that the course was canceled. So I'm not clear if they were able to take it at DVC or if they were simply not able to access calculus this year.
This is certainly something that we're talking to all of our master schedules at the high school. We do know IB is a very specific example. It's a specialty program at one of our high schools. It's quite often that they have what are called singletons. That is one class on their campus. They put it in the schedule. And sometimes it doesn't always work with other people's schedules, depending on where you put their classes. So schools that have that level of need, but also they have a higher level of funding in order to support students that are on that campus, we can sometimes allocate supplemental funds in such a way in order to support that effort. But it really goes back to ensuring that we know the students very early when we're building the schedule. So we can then set things up in such a way that students can be programmed appropriately so they can get access to that class, while at the same time keeping an eye on our student numbers. It is certainly talking about an engineering feat. These master schedules are ones where, you're balancing student needs as well as the FTE and the number of teachers and the credentialing and the length of the day and all of that. So I appreciate the feedback. And again, we've got several folks in the audience that are, as we speak, looking at master schedules with a goal of fall 2022 being something that's a lot more structured around student needs. And hopefully we won't have as many singletons in the situation that you just described occur.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your work on that. Okay, that takes us to 18.2, review and potential approval of facility project planning prioritization.
On this, I'm going to have the M&O staff come up and do this presentation. Turn this over to Dr. Gonzalez.
Board members, Superintendent Clark, colleagues that are here, and members of the community. The last meeting that we had a week ago, we started rolling out next steps for a prioritization for a facility master plan, as well as some timelines. And so what you have before you this evening is our next phase. And we're going to try to keep bringing these back fairly frequently, as well as to the Measure J Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, because a lot of their purview is a lot of the work that's in here. So the intent of this evening's presentation is really to go through a handful of things, but really provide a context revisit some of what the FCMAT report recently said, take a look at some funding sources just to clarify perhaps some misinformation, and then just start going down the road of how we got to where we are and what we're asking for support of this evening. A lot of information on here, but really what we did was we took a look at the big recommendations for facility type work. That was part of the plan that was presented last week in the review from FCMAT. Everything from utilizing developer fees to establishing expectations to a comprehensive 5-year deferred maintenance plan. This slide also looks familiar. It's another repeat of last week, but we really want to make sure that we're continuing to sort of go through and talk about where we've been. Where we've been is that we've had a number of changes. We had some work that was started, and really our intent is to continue to move forward with a very clear plan for our facilities. There are a number of different funding sources. And so we want to make sure that when we're talking about a facility master plan and any of the prioritization, it seems that in times we see this as Measure J, and it really isn't just Measure J. And so we wanted to just outline some different funding sources because they all play into the bucket or the umbrella, if you will, of what can support facilities. That would include Measures J and Measure A, two very different funding sources. Measure J that was approved by the voters in 2018, thank you. Focusing on safety, security, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, technology for classrooms, labs, and then really STEM and CTE facilities. Not to be confused with Measure A that the voters approved back in the 1990s. And that really talks a lot about general facility work, all allowable expenses there. We also have a routine restricted maintenance. That is a 3% requirement from our general fund for major maintenance work like fencing, roofs, HVAC at times, other fixtures, and a lot of our longstanding grounds work. We also can use developer fees. Now those start becoming a little more specific. And so when we look at all of these, there are really restrictions to every single one, but developer fees, again, they're very restricted and they're intended to mitigate growth that is happening within developments. So as you see developments going in a certain area, there are developer fees that will come out of that. And although I think the original legislation was written to sort of focus the funds on that area, they are really general funds that we can use across the entire span of the district. Although clearly, as you have growth in certain areas, you have needs in those certain areas as well. We have ESSER 2, ESSER 3, and some other one-time funding sources that allow investments in things like facility upgrades, fencing, security cameras, HVAC and air quality. And then we also have E-rate funding. And it's important that when we're talking about facility type work that we're also really including technology. And so one of the things that you're going to see moving forward is that not only are we going to have representation from the facilities department, but we're also going to have representation all of the time with the technology department because the work really needs to go hand in hand. So with that said, we have Eric Moraes, who's here with us this evening. He is our Director of Facilities and Bonds. The two of us are going to tag team this presentation with some help from Robert Sidford as well, who is our Director of Technology and Innovation.
So we have a lot of data, through the work that we've done in the last 6 months. It's provided us a lot of data. In this slide shows all the new data that we've gathered in the last 6 months. Some of the data that's in this is part of the facilities master data document, which are site acreages, gross classroom square footages, students per acre, grade level served, enrollment, and many other project prioritizing components that we will be using moving forward that were just too much to share with you to see legibly. So that's why we didn't include it, of course. Also to note, there's a lot of departments I'd like to thank that contributed to this document. Melanie Kozlow, Director of Maintenance, Laura Juranek, Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, Jennifer Sachs, Chief of Educational Services, Robert Sidford, IT Director, and my facility construction managers, Rosadina Baharin and Charlie Bygarten, and so many others for assisting us in this data collection and letting me work with their teams as well on getting this data. I'd also like to thank our Chief of Business, Lisa Gonzalez, for her leadership and guidance and resources that she has provided throughout this data collection. I would also like to thank as well Dr. Clark, the Board of Education, and the Mount Diablo Contra Costa community that we serve for their trust and patience as we dialed in on our facility needs. This right here is the facilities prioritization scoring column. These 8 columns are part of the facilities master data document that was just shown in the previous slide. To note, this is just one way that we will determine the prioritization of district capital projects. Highlighted below are the scoring columns and how they are calculated. I'd like to just touch on examples of what they mean to us. The student density score. The student density score tells us how many students we have per acre, which is what we can use in determining the amount of wear and tear that we have on our campus. The classroom usage score, similar to the student density, the classroom usage score tells us the usage of our classrooms and tells us our facilities depreciation. Parking availability score is based on student enrollment divided by available parking. We'll be using this to identify where we can improve on available parking to reduce overcrowding at school pickup. Roofing, paving, and exterior painting life cycle. These columns here tell us where our buildings are in their life cycle. For example, the roofing score tells us where our roofing ranks on its 30-year life cycle. The HVAC life cycle score is the average age of our HVAC per campus, and we scored them. The work order score is the total number of work orders open and then scored. We will be refining this as we go forward to separate work orders by category. For example, roofing, ADA, drywall, and electrical. Next slide, please.
And then for this next slide, although he can't be here in person, I think we may have Robert Sidford's voice.
Hi, everybody. This is Robert Sidford. I really apologize that I can't be there tonight. I did want to take a few minutes to go over the prioritization criteria for technology and infrastructure under the facilities master plan. As you can see, there are 9 criteria that we've collected data around. And before I go into each of those briefly, I did just want to call out the entire Technology and Information Services Department for assisting with this data collection. You can probably tell that there's a substantial amount of data that took us quite a bit of time to collect. And so we really appreciate their work in doing that. The first category is enrollment. Obviously, we want to serve as many students as possible, as quickly as possible with improved technology resources. Second, we have educational programming, which reflects the scope and breadth of technology use in our buildings. We know, for example, that as students move through middle school and into high school, that there are increased demands on their technology use for different educational programming. An example of this would be our CTE programming in our high schools. Next is classroom audiovisual. For the most part, we see our schools moving towards digital displays. You could think of these as large screen TVs, and in some cases, the ability to cast from teacher and student devices to those displays. So this criteria reflects the degree to which our schools currently have that capacity. Next are elements of our physical network. We know that our structured cabling is not up to standard to meet the needs of a 21st century learning environment. We also, in that category, have a score for known stability issues, and I just wanted to point out at this point that we will probably continue to uncover additional stability issues as schools report those. The MDF-IDF category relates to the age and condition of our server rooms, our racking, switches, etc. Basically, all of our schools have substantial needs in this area. Wireless access points refers to the endpoint equipment that actually transmits a wireless signal within our classrooms. Currently, that is not up to a standard that really supports a one-to-one environment. The next two categories talk about our CCTV security camera system, both on the server side and on the actual camera side. And finally, the last category deals with our phone system. Currently, we have two different types of systems deployed. One is our PBX analog system in most schools, and then a handful of schools have a very aging voice over internet system that is long out of support.
What we did was we took some simple screenshots just so that you could see a piece of all of the data that was collected. And so this is really a screenshot that's facility related. You want to go ahead and explain this one?
Right. So, what did the data tell us? In some ways, it just confirmed what we already knew, that our building infrastructure is outdated and needs work in a lot of areas. The second part is what this data helps us with, finding what work needs to be done first. The document you're looking at is a snapshot of our where our high priority is, as indicated by our scoring matrix. You can see that currently this document is based off a grand total of 90, but it's been fixed since then to have a total of 100. This is a working document that we're refining. And we'll also be adding building systems, other building systems that require a refresh cycle as well to this. As I mentioned before, this is only used to give us data-driven guidance on prioritizing projects. There will always be needs outside of data that we'll need to have assessed separately. For example, if new paving was just put on a campus this year and there was a shift in the terrain from fatigue cracks, weather damage, or leakage from underground plumbing that loosened the soil underneath the pavement, we wouldn't know that by just data only. In that example, the only way that we could verify that is by doing in-person, on the site, yearly or semi-annual facility assessments of all of our campuses. Next slide, please.
In a similar manner, this spreadsheet here is, again, another screenshot that just shows some of the top areas where there is the greatest technology need. And so one of the columns I will call out is the number, it's the fifth column, the percentage of fiber optic cabling. Everything here is scored a 20 because this is one of our greatest needs right now in the district. And the whole sort of infrastructure and facility mapping that's really taking place with regard to technology needs to be our next step. But there are some school sites that are going to be scored higher. For example, our high schools really do rise to the top because when we look at them collectively, they have pretty much all of their students on one-to-one devices, and they are extremely large. So when we're able to put attention into our high schools, we're able to really get the most support to the quickest number of students as we can. Now, that does not mean that we are not working on other sites that have major connectivity issues, because just this last week, as we were prepping for this presentation for our board deadline, there was a school site that we had squirrels and some of their little friends who went in and decided that they were going to chew up a lot of the cabling and other things they got into, which means that now that site has to rise to the top because that becomes a very urgent need. Right. So again, these documents are living, breathing, but as we have needs that come up, we're really going to try to prioritize them based on, what are the greatest needs, and really taking a look at that technology and the facility components simultaneously and not in isolation.
So the project planning and implementation, in no particular order, these are the projects that we have identified, which consists pretty much of our entire building envelope due to the age of our buildings. The good news is that all of these future projects are eligible for modernization funding from the state that could cover up to 60% of the total cost for each project. We are working with the state facilities consultants and intend to do this with every modernization project going forward so that we can maximize the funding that the community has bestowed upon us and make sure that every cent is spent appropriately to our needs. Next slide. This is the energy control project. This is one of two projects that we would like the board's approval or blessings on. When I came to this district 6 months ago, we had just finished phase 1 of the energy control project, which is highlighted as yellow on the graph. What we are proposing to you today is that we continue that project into phase 2, which is identified as green on the graph. While we did do solar for some of our exterior lighting, most of our sites in the district are still fluorescent lighting and not LED. The reason why this project is critical is because there's an estimated $1.3 million of anticipated energy savings to the district that we can use in beautification projects or in life cycle systems.
I think Mr. Sidford might be joining us again.
Thanks, Lisa and Eric. So let's move on to our overall prioritization for lighting, building envelope, and technology and infrastructure. So I'd first like to draw your attention to the bottom left-hand side of the chart that shows phases 1, 2, 3, and 4, which are initial phases we've identified for these projects. These are determined by the prioritization that we've presented previously in this presentation. Phase 1 is what we are asking for your input and approval on today. I'll let Eric chime in directly around the lighting and building envelope components of this chart. As you can see, specifically under building envelope, we're yet to make a variety of prioritizations there as we work to determine how the different funding sources are going to work together to ensure that we can use the funding available in the most appropriate ways. Those determinations will be made around the building envelope pieces. The other consideration there is that we are at work building a framework for a deferred maintenance plan, which will be coming forward to you in an upcoming board meeting. And that's going to have some impact on how we prioritize a lot of this work. Looking directly at the technology and infrastructure component of the chart, which is at the very bottom, you can see how the phases that we've identified here correspond directly to the prioritization that we outlined above. In the case of the technology projects at each site, the first phase is necessarily the network design. For sites identified here as phase 1 sites, the first step for us will be to engage a network engineering firm to design each of those sites individually, so that work can then subsequently be bid out, and that's where you see in the green the phase 2 portions for each of those sites. Sites identified with a green box under network design are tentatively scheduled for phase 2. The remaining sites are tentatively scheduled in phases 3 and 4, again, based on the prioritization. Lisa, did you have anything to add?
Well, I think that pretty much covers it. Thank you, Mr. Sidford.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that with the work that's going on in IT, we'll be running our project simultaneously because there is an economy of scale there. And while we go to these sites, for the networking portion, we'll also want to incorporate some facilities assessments at the same time.
Just going back to our rankings and our point systems based on all of the data that we've collected, some of the sites that become higher priority on the facility side include sites like Walnut Acres, Diablo View, Meadow Homes, and you can see them going down the list. The same thing goes for technology infrastructure. So as you saw before, the traditional high schools, and then a number of sites. But it's really interesting because when we started drawing some lines, what you can see is that many of these locations fall into other columns as well. And so this is really where we're going to start some of our work, because we know that Oak Grove has a number of needs in both sides of the house, as do the high schools, Pleasant Hill Middle School, and Walnut Acres. So it was really interesting when we sort of did this crosswalk to see where things landed. With that said, we are happy to entertain any questions. I know that we responded to some prior to the board meeting. We had 2 listening sessions that were scheduled with anybody from the Measure J Citizens Bond Oversight Committee and had some really positive responses there, and plan on continuing to use that group for listening sessions to be able to gain as much feedback as we can as we move forward in this work.
I have a couple of comments. It seems unintentionally to me, hopefully unintentionally, that your matrices are skewed where they're going to favor the schools that are more affluent. Because if you're looking at technology and what rooms have all the audiovisual, some of those parent groups have contributed over the years. So those schools naturally are going to have more than your schools with less parent monetary involvement. And then also when you're looking at the scoring where you had parking and work orders, the parking, again, if you have a lot of students that have cars that come and park, you're going to have limited parking. If you have a school that the parents can't afford to buy a car for their kid and they're riding a bus, you're not going to have as much of a parking need. So I'm just concerned that we might want to look at those and make sure they're not skewing our more affluent schools unintentionally. And then the other thing, going back to my days as a high school student where we raised money for a swimming pool and football lights, and then they closed our school and there went all our money. We never found out where it went. I think the developer fees need to be spent in the area that they're intended for, whether, and that's not just Bay Point, there's other areas as well, but even though there might be some leeway, I think it's important those monies go to support the schools where the development is happening. So those were some of the things that stood out to me, and I'd be happy to hear from some of our other board members. And if I understood, you're looking for approval for mainly the phase 2 of the energy one.
Yeah, phase 2 of the energy.
Yeah.
And then phase 1 of the IT design portion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then really approving the overall prioritization that we have here, because there are other things that may not necessarily fit in those categories.
I just want to say thank you for all of the work on this and the data that you're gathering. It is something that we've been looking for and looking forward to. And so, and I appreciate that it's a living, breathing document, so you'll be able to take into account some of the things that were mentioned here tonight as well. So thank you.
I apologize. I'm going to continue to ask questions around Measure A funding because I recall a lot of heated discussions as we were going through the community engagement back in 1988 and 1989, and some things that I recall as promises made, and I need to determine if they are in writing in the bond language. So I will be working with Dr. Gonzalez around that because I do feel we need to honor those commitments that were in writing. Yes, many people heard promises that may not have been expressed specifically by the individuals during discussions. That often happens, but whatever is in writing is important. And the one thing that happened in one of the discussions was just by the enrollment numbers at our high schools, those are going to rise to the top first. And is that always going to be the determining factor? I was glad to see that Riverview was up there too. It's it has a higher, one of the higher scores.
Probably because it's a high school.
Well, but it's based on the number of students when anyway, it shows that there are needs across all of the criteria for Riverview Middle School. So it has some infrastructure needs there.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam President, I will move that the board approve staff recommendation of facility project planning and prioritization.
A second.
Okay. Trustee Fowler,
Yes.
I'm not seeing my yes button here. I probably
Well,
have to.
I guess I wasn't quite ready to vote.
Oh, I did.
Has everybody else already voted? Because I'm not sure what we were actually approving. Were we approving document 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
We were approving phase 2,
right?
And then phase 1, and overall the concept I got of the program, of the document, because it continues to be a living document that will come back to us for approvals.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes, and as individual projects come forward, those will also come to the board with references and FCMAT verification as well.
Okay, that passes 5-0 with concurrence from our student trustee. Okay. 18.3, review updates to board policy and administrative regulations, 514.21, administration of medications, and we do have a public speaker on this, Julie or Mary Ann, school nurses. Oh, and they've hung in there all this time.
Hi, good evening, President Mason, Superintendent Clark, and Board Trustees. My name is Julie Ronhar. I'm one of the Mount Diablo school nurses and here on behalf of our group. We want to thank each of you. We appreciate your role in guiding the district and ensuring that we are making choices that represent what is best for our school community and for our students. We appreciate that the revision to this board policy does have some positive changes. It's bringing forth the ability to put Narcan, which is an opioid reversal medication, make it available on our school campuses. It's also providing some needed clarifications that we needed regarding the ability to train unlicensed persons in the event that anti-seizure medications are needed or seizure reversal medicines are needed on campus. But we felt it was important to take our time to be here tonight because we do have significant safety concerns regarding one of the components of this revision. And that's where the board policy has been struck out to remove the text that states that insulin is only to be administered by school nurses or by trained medical personnel. And it's been sort of left, not replaced with any text, and allowing the district to hire unlicensed personnel to give insulin. And so we just feel that that's a true safety concern for our students. While it might be permitted by California law and by Ed Code, it's not standard of care, and we don't feel that it is in the best interest of our students with diabetes. So we've shared our position with the district administration, and we just feel that there's further discussion that needs to occur to try to resolve our concerns. And we're looking forward to having more collaborative discussions before this policy comes back to you for an action vote. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any board members have any questions or comments for Dr. Clark?
We have a presentation. We have a
Okay, an
short
actual presentation.
that Dr. Goon is going to do.
Coming up.
I sent it to Laura Joannick earlier in the day. All right. It's a great presentation, just so you know. I shared it with her in a Google document earlier in the day. I can speak through it. It's okay. We don't have to look at it. There is a presentation attached, which I'm happy to forward to anybody who wants to see it, or we can certainly post it at a later date. But I do want to remind everybody that this is an informational item tonight, and this is a long process, and it's a long overdue process. Essentially, there's two components like our nurses spoke to. The first one is regarding Narcan on campuses, and we know this is life-saving. Our current board policy does not allow for that. There is legislation that was changed that does allow for that. Many school districts have it. It's available at no charge. There's certainly requirements where we have to train the volunteers. There are agencies out there who also train volunteers, again, at no charge. We also know that statistically speaking, only about 1% of Narcan administration is done at schools and universities combined. So this is not something we anticipate doing every day, every week, but we do anticipate that this might be something that could happen and could save a life in the future, and really at no cost to the district, should we be able to secure trained volunteers. They are protected under particular laws. You know, they don't have personal liability as long as they're not acting in malice. They are definitely protected as they administer this in good faith to people who they believe are under the influence and need this medication. The second part is the insulin part. And I want to be really clear, again, this is informational. And this is coming around from about a 2013, I'm sorry, the American Nurses Organization versus Tom Torlakson et al. And what they said is that school nurses should be administering insulin. Insulin is a medication that can be very dangerous if errors are made. So there's a whole lot of pieces to this, but the decision that was handed down essentially said that schools have the authority to give medication, and it's being authorized that not school nurses can give medication. The actual language is in the presentation. So they declined to rule on it. Therefore, it was perfectly allowable. And then shortly after that, the following year in 2014, the American Nurse Association plus the California School Nurse Association set out a joint paper and said, yeah, we support this. So both of those organizations did go ahead and share that and support. They wrote a white paper. I understand they probably wrote that white paper in the absence of any other options, because if you're going to have to administer insulin in schools, then you want to make sure that everyone is trained how to do that safely. There are a bunch of safeguards written into that in order for anybody to have insulin or any medication administered by a trained volunteer, is what they're called. Then it has to be signed off by a physician, and it also has to be signed off by a parent. There are no surprises. So this would not be something you would be doing for a person who was newly diagnosed with diabetes, or a person who was, having violent fluctuations within their blood sugar. That often happens at different times throughout a person's life if they're ill, or hormonal changes, or et cetera, et cetera. So this would only be people who are stable, and if the physician approved it, and if the parent approved it. I also want to be really clear, again, this is information only. The reason this was brought about is because we do have children to this day who are not able to attend school because we do not have nursing support available for them. Certain things such as nursing assistants or medical assistants, those types of things, we can't use those particular staff members. So our first step is changing board policy, and board policy is followed by administrative regulations and then district procedures. I don't make district procedures by myself. That would all be made in collaboration with our professionals in that area, including our school nurses and our labor partners. And in addition, we also want to recognize the school nurses, because they have spoken out multiple times that they're frequently pulled from their regular jobs in order to provide these services at other schools, because across this district and state and country, there are simply not enough medical personnel. So this is not an attempt to, push something through where we're going to put everybody's lives in danger. This is the first step in a longer conversation and a more purposeful process in order to actually increase access for our kids and to enable our school nurses to do the work that they were hired to do. So I'm happy to take questions.
So to reiterate, for, if we were to go down this road,
Yes.
the doctor and the parent has to approve of someone other than a nurse giving the insulin to their child, and then we would just have a cadre of trained staff that could do that?
Correct. So we could have trained staff. At this moment, we do not have job descriptions, which is why I mentioned working with our labor partners. We would be able to contract with agencies almost immediately while we worked on those things. And yes, you are correct that it would have to be authorized by the physician, and that's by Ed Code and the parent. And should, say, for example, a child is stable and then all of a sudden they're not stable, they can change the orders and say, no, it has to be a nurse now. That's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the requirement is a nurse versus an LVN?
Currently, it's a nurse, but should we go down, other districts do this already. They use personnel other than nurses, like nursing assistants, medical assistants, those types of things, or trained volunteers in some particular cases. We've been reviewing, I worked with Linda Pete, and we did pull job descriptions from other districts across the state and even across the country. And some of them do not even require the CNA or MA. They're trained volunteers. And the training is for all medication administration, such as the ones the nurse was talking about for the seizures, which is a common one is Diastat, which is a seizure medication. And then that is the California School Nurse Association has an entire training program, which is used by nurses to train volunteers. And when I say volunteer, I mean an unlicensed medical professional. But they recommend using the American Diabetes Association training on how to train people in schools, lay people in schools, how to administer that.
And this training would also cover anaphylactic medication? Or is that treated differently?
All the medications are covered in the diabetes is by the is in the diabetes training for American Diabetes. The anaphylactic shock, that would be in the other one, which would be covers 4 different types of medication administration, I believe, when I looked at it. Yes. And it's all laid out. It's a sort of packaged curriculum. And of course, we don't have to adopt that, but what I'm saying is it's available should we choose to go down that road after we've met with our nurses.
Okay. One more question just on the policy as a whole, if it's for administration of medication. I did receive 3 additional suggestions, and I'm wondering if it makes sense for them to go into this policy. You don't have to answer tonight, but it's something I'm interested in finding out about. One is the administration of aspirin for non-traumatic chest pain.
Right.
Another is optional addition of a choking treatment device to school first aid kits. And then lastly, training youth with the most updated curriculum of the FEMA Teen Cert.
Thank you for those considerations. We'll look into those.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So you didn't even need the slides.
Good memory.
So again, that was a info only item, but I want to encourage the board, if you have questions, you can send those to me and I'll get it out to the appropriate staff. And I did look at other districts around us to see if there were any other board policies that just outlined one particular group to be able to provide this, and I could not find any. So anyway, we're open to answer any questions or follow up on this in any way that the board wishes.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are on 18.4, review and potential approval of the 2022-2023 school year calendar and the 2023-2024 school year calendar.
Yep, so I have Mr. Sheehy from our Human Resources Department who's going to present this item.
Thank you so much. So I brought this item for info back in December, and today it is in front of you as action. I do want to walk through kind of the process of how we got to the school year calendars and where we left off in the informational meeting. So on October 27th, there was a survey that was sent out to all stakeholders in our community, our staff and our families. We had over 4,000 responses to that survey. I know that one of the big hot topics is the start date of school. We did have over 69% of the responses were in favor of ending the first semester prior to the winter break, meaning that we need to start earlier in August. And only 12% of those of the responses felt like it was a bad idea. The other responses were indifferent. Many people felt that ending the winter, going into winter break at December 23rd was too late prior to what we've done in years past. The survey showed that many wanted more 3-day weekends. If needed, would rather have inclement weather days built in rather than tacked on at the end. And then there were about 860 overall comments provided in the additional comment section of the survey. The common themes that we saw were why have smoke days when we can do Zoom school? I like having school start earlier so we can get as much in before state testing. Stop starting school so early in August. A week off is better than random days here and there. And please match surrounding school district calendars. So those were the common themes as I looked through those 860 comments. So that was the first step. The second step is we took that feedback of the community. We developed two draft calendars for each school year. So a total of 4 calendars were created, and we brought them to a calendar committee on November 8th. And the calendar committee consisted of members of every one of our labor partners, with the exception of CSEA, who chose not to participate. And then we also had members from student services, ed services, and then elementary, middle, and high school principals were also represented. Input was gathered from the committee. There was a desire from teaching staff to have more days in the second semester to balance the state testing graduation days that occur in the spring. Based off of the feedback from that committee, 1 calendar per year was revised and created into a draft version. We then took that information and I sat down with the chief of ed services to ensure that the calendar aligned with the instructional calendar. We want to make sure that our school year really does match that instructional piece of schooling. After reviewing the calendar with ed services, the calendar was reviewed by executive cabinet prior to coming to the Board of Education as information on December 8th. When we brought it to the board for information, one of the concerns that we had was the lack of emergency makeup days, or also known as smoke days. Which we know that we want to do that, and in sharing that with our labor partner, there was a demand to bargain, which we did. We did sit down at the table and actively negotiate the calendar. With it not being a requirement from the state, currently the state is not a requirement to have those additional days built in. It is a recommendation to look at the last 5 fiscal years, look at the average amount of emergency days that we had and build that in, because the governor, it has been shared that they will not be providing additional funding for days that our buildings are closed. However, it is not a requirement. Based off of that information and discussions at the table, we were not able to come to an agreement. So we decided to take the calendar forward because it is important to get the information into the hands of our community, our staff, as quickly as possible, because everybody knows that they have activities to plan, and we want to make sure that they're planning that outside of the school year calendar. It is an understanding. However, in an emergency situation where we do have to close school, there is a potential of us needing to sit down with our labor partners and revisit the amount, if we are closed, revisit the addition of school days. And we do understand that might be an inconvenience to the community and to our staff. However, it is something that we may need to visit down the road. And with that, I'll open up to any questions, comments.
I just have a process question. So if the board wanted to make a big change to this, it's really not in our authority to do. It would have to go back through the negotiating process, correct?
Depends on the change in the school year calendar. Some of the impact and the effects of the school year calendar is a negotiable item. So it really depend on the change.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Madam President, I move the board adopt the 22-23 and 23-24 school year calendars as presented.
I'll second.
Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
Thank you. And
Just-
that- Yes.
I just want to commend staff for doing the survey and all the work. The last time we did a major change to a calendar where it moved earlier in the year, we had quite a few emails and many comments at the podium. And this process, I don't believe that I received any comments about the school calendars. So that shows that the survey work at least informed parents that we were looking at the calendars, and I think they are just looking for the start date in the fall.
Yes, and to that end, I think one of the goals that was mentioned a couple of years ago on this by Board Member Lawrence, I believe, was we can get into the process of always being an additional year ahead so that we don't run into this issue. That would be much appreciated so we always know when the first day of school is 1 year ahead.
Thank you. And that passed 5 with the, I thought he was answering with an additional vote by Trustee Fowler. Okay. Takes us to 18.5, review and potential approval of the Williams Quarterly Report for January 31st, 2022.
Yep, and if you have any questions, Ms. Sachs is here to answer them, but if not, we're seeking approval on this item.
Okay.
Madam President, I move to approve ratification of the Williams Quarterly Summary Report, January 31st, 2022.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
And that passes 5 plus 1 from our student trustee. All righty. 18.6, review and potential approval of the Board of Education committee assignments for 2022.
So yeah, so these assignments were shared with the entire board, and so I will leave it to you, President Mason, to see if there's any changes to that list.
Did all the board members receive the new list? And I would just say, since we're all about board policy tonight, talking about board policy, just a reminder to all of us that these are standing committees, and per the current board policy that we have, when attending these meetings, the 2 designated board members are the only ones to speak. If you're welcome to attend any, but once there's a third there, it's a quorum and we would be violating the Brown Act. So just as we move forward, be mindful. It's hard sometimes, but we're gonna go by the rules. So if there's no changes or questions suggested, I will go ahead and entertain a motion. Take your time to read it if you haven't.
Were there any other questions? Madam President, I move to approve the 2022 board committee assignments.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
And that passes 5 plus 1. Takes us to 18.7, review and potential approval of integrated systems project manager title, job description, and range update. Dr. Gonzalez, it looks like.
Thank you. So in my humble opinion, from the business perspective, non-instructional side of the house, there are two extremely important positions in the district. The first one is the position control that makes sure that we have the money and the positions to bring people in. And when your position control falls apart, so does everything else. That's staffed by Sandra Inouye. The second position is currently titled Integrated Systems Project Manager, which for anybody on the outside trying to look at a position like that, you have no idea what it means. We're having an opening in that position, and it really made sense for us to take a look at where the position reported, what the range was, what the description was, and what the title was. Because if we want to hire someone, it's got to have a position title that represents the work, because otherwise we're going to post it and nobody's going to respond. So our proposal this evening is to change that to data. I don't have this written down. Data and
Application Systems Manager job.
Thank you very much. We are taking that position for a number of reasons, and we're taking it from a range 36 down to a range 25. Mostly because we've taken a look at the workload and the fact that compared to other director positions that we have, as a manager, it was much higher, and it does not supervise any people, as opposed to the departments that it directly works with. We are tightening up the job description that really defines what the work is. So anybody applying is going to be able to understand that. And we are also making the move to put that under the Technology Information Systems Department, which would be under the direction of Mr. Sidford. The reason for that is because this is a position that heavily relies on technology. And we know that moving it that way is going to be extremely beneficial to really create a cohesive team over in technology. With that said, the position is going to do the bulk of its work over on the fiscal side of the house, because that's where the need is. So in other words, this is your business plus system manager. So happy to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, if there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd just like to say it's nice to see some savings in the area of management. We appreciate that. I move to approve the job title, description, and range for the Integrated Systems Project Manager.
I'll second.
Thank you. Trustee Fowler?
Yes.
And that passes 5+1. Okay, 18.8, review extending positive budget certification during declining enrollment and salary increases. Information, and would that be Dr. Clark or Dr. Gonzalez?
It's going to be Dr. Clark, but I am going to call on the team to chime in. Unfortunately, we are in a district where our enrollment has been declining over the last several years, and there have been some adjustments to staffing. And again, I'm not going to go back in time and debate those, what happened or what didn't happen. But I know the situation that we're facing today is that we have to come up with a plan to address our staffing numbers due to declining enrollment. And also, we during first interim, we were able to certify a positive budget. And in terms of that budget being certified, there were certain assumptions that had been made. Number one is that we have currently on the table right now for our bargaining groups, we have a 7.5% raise on the table. And over a 3-year period, that is going to cost the district a significant amount of money that we have to make adjustments for. So there is going to have to be a discussion on what programs are we really looking to continue and to keep, and within those programs, oftentimes there's staff tied to those programs. And so there's some changes in the law, and this may be a new process for some, but I just wanted to make sure that we were updated on our process for notification, and why that needs to take place. And so I wanted to bring this to put this on the agenda and to be able to discuss openly with the board about this process. And so I am going to tap Dr. Rubio to talk about classified and certificated notifications, because we did have a change in the law in the area of notifying classified staff.
Good evening, board members and community members. As you may know, the change in the law specifically beginning this year grants the same, pretty much the same rights that certificated teachers have had through the years in the layoff process to classified members. So it's the same in that manner. The trickier part is that classified layoffs are usually much more difficult in some ways, arguably, because there is a lot of bumping that occurs based on people's seniority dates or positions they held in prior positions. So we literally, for every employee who's involved, we've got to go and we're trying to find a simpler way to just pay screen to pay screen to pay screen to look within the system at every position they've ever had to make sure we have a very accurate picture of where they may have rights to go to if they're based on their seniority, if they need to be shifted into another position. So as Dr. Clark referenced, it is a big change in the law. I think it's going to be, it's going to be a lot of work for us, and we're going to do our best to make sure we're giving you accurate information, because this is not an area, as you know, where we want to make any mistakes. So happy to entertain any questions you have in that process. We are working now with our council. We had a large meeting last week. We're looking at our seniority list. Our staff is looking, working on those to try to make sure we have those in order. I'm happy to report in the fall, and I really want to thank the employees of Mount Diablo Unified, because we had over 4,200 employees, not all in bargaining units based on that number, update their addresses, their phone numbers. So we were able to get all that information updated with the help of staff and our systems. And so when we send out verification letters, which we did in late December, saying, hey, here's what we see as your credential. Here's what we see as your seniority date. You know, let us know if you see an error. We have very few of those letters coming back as bad addresses, which is great. So that's helped us a lot. We're always working to improve our data and our integrity in our systems. And so it's a very big area and a lot of work for us. But we're getting, I think we're improving that in that area. And so we are in the process, and we will be coming back to you with more information as we go through that in the next 8 weeks.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Go ahead, Trustee Mayo.
So just to confirm, so I clearly understand, all employees in the Mount Diablo School District, whether they're certificated or classified, must be notified by March 15th if we intend to lay them off.
Yes, the action, there has to be board action by March 15th, and then final action, I believe, which I believe is a May date or May 15th. But yes, that's correct. So it's the same date, same process for certificated and classified now.
And I also just wanted to add that earlier this year, two important things took place. Is that we also had FCMAC come out and do a physical health study on us, and some within their recommendations, I included that in the description for this item, was to limit the deficit spending, which we've been doing for some time in this district. And so they really want us to not limit it, but to eliminate deficit spending. But then also it talks about really working out that ratio of staff to students, and that ratio really needs to be consistent throughout. And I know that we're also looking at how that works out with our classified employees, and sometimes that's a little bit more difficult. So I do want to recognize that and the difficulty that we're going to face in that. But also, we also approved under the assembly bill is dodging my brain right now. But when we bring forward a increase in salary, we have to demonstrate in that same actions how we're going to be able to pay for that. And so currently, what we have on the table is going to require us to make staff reductions. And so whenever an agreement is reached, when we reach that agreement, we have to be able to show that we've made the adjustments to our budget to, to be able to pay for that. And it is, it's an extremely painful process. It's something that, nobody wants to go through this process, but when over 85% and above of your salary is or our budget is tied up in salaries and benefits for everybody, when you're looking at reducing, you're either going to reduce people or you're going to reduce services or goods. And so none of this is going to be easy. So we did just want to get this on the board's radar, and definitely on the public's radar and on our staff's radar, that that this process is unfortunately ahead of us, and staff is working diligently on making sure that we do this correctly and that we're getting the proper information to the board.
I just want to say I appreciate you bringing this, being very transparent about this so that we and the public understand how the process has changed. I think it is very challenging, just the structure of education funding in our state and the way that the pink slip process works. We have to put out these pink slips in March, but oftentimes by the time the state approves their budget in June, we have a much better now we actually know how much money we're getting from the state, and a number of those people end up being hired back or essentially not being laid off, but we still had to give them the slip that said they might be, right? And what I see here is that now we need to do that for classified as well. So it's going to feel like a lot more people are losing their jobs, even if they aren't ultimately losing them, because they'll get that notification that's now required to be earlier. So I'm not looking forward to this process.
Right.
It's going to be a challenge.
And
for sure.
not only that, Trustee Count, is as Dr. Rubio brought up, because of bumping rights, we may propose that we eliminate a particular position, right? And I'm not even going to name any position because I don't want to cause any undue anxiety, but it may be in one area. However, with the bumping rights, we have to give notices to everyone who might be bumped because of that, and that might that might go outside of that particular domain, right? And so someone where maybe we have a shortage of staff may be receiving a layoff notice, and it's like, they're going to be totally taken off guard. Like, I didn't know that this position was being considered for reductions or elimination or whatnot. And so, but that's just the way that this has to take place because of state law and employee laws and things of that nature. But I just want to reiterate that it is a painful and difficult process, and we're in the middle of a very challenging time, and this is just going to create more challenges for many, and we're not looking forward to this.
For 22 years, and I can't tell you how many times I was laid off and had to bump into another position or change a position. It's not fun. It causes a lot of stress, but we have no choice, unfortunately.
I can see as it's being described, and it feels really icky. So I want to acknowledge that. I assume it feels icky to everybody, and we know it's coming. But I'm sorry, but I can see the headlines now for all of our school districts in March. Like, it's going to be more pink slips than ever before without the context. And so I would encourage our district to communicate freely and openly. Obviously, you do that with our whole employee community, but with our entire community, because I can see parents, like, we see how rumors, I've gotten to experience how rumors just like take off without the full context or understanding, because a normal person wouldn't, because none of this makes sense. The way we do this in California, and I don't know if it's done like this in every state, but the way we treat public education, it's shameful and it makes no sense whatsoever, but it's what we have today. And so whatever we can do to communicate with the community that at least this year, and while moving forward, hopefully it's never as dire as it seems, in March. But that this is the process that we have to follow. And we don't suck as much as it looks like. But we all have empathy for the people who will be impacted and have this uncertainty for a whole quarter. And that's just really awful that people are put through that year after year after year. So that's my 2 cents.
And keep us updated. With that, unless there's something for the good of the order. Yes, we have one from trustee Mayo.
It's a comment about the board committee assignments. I don't know if I printed out the latest one, but there is a blank cell in one of the, in the document. Pass that down to me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's not.
Oh, I guess I missed this email.
Yeah, I think normally it is attached, or would it be attached on the next agenda? Because it was not on the public agenda, I don't think yet, so.
I don't think it was last year either, but we can attach it to the next agenda if you'd like.
I think it would be
So
helpful so that the public can see who got
Yep.
assigned where for the year, yes.
So I'm just, I will verify that everything is the same.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And again, on that note, we are adjourned.